Well, I want to welcome you. I found out that most leaders don't struggle because they lack talent. They struggle because the weight gets heavy, decisions stack up, and there's no place to think out loud. So I want to welcome you to Funding Your Future Now podcast. My name is Dr. Randy Dirks. I've been in the fundraising world as an executive for 27 years, and it is my delight today to welcome our guest, Tricia Richardson. And she has spent years in the nonprofit world as a CEO, leading a statewide organization. She's worked with boards, funders, public agencies. I think you name it, and Tricia's been involved in it in some way. So welcome, Tricia. Why don't you just take a moment or two and introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, Randy. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm really excited about having this conversation with you. Again, my name is Tricia Richardson. I have been in the nonprofit world for over 30 years and recently retired from that. And now I'm doing some coaching through my own consultancy business and really enjoying that time of my life.
Great. When you have that kind of expertise background, you've got something of value to offer to others. So I appreciate that. So here's a question. You've worked with leaders in moments of growth, transition, burnout, all the cycles that are there. What would you say are some early warning signs that a nonprofit leader, president, executive, is approaching their limit before it becomes a crisis? So when you start seeing maybe not those red flashing lights, but you see the ambers, and they're signs and indicators. What are those early warning signs, and what could you help in addressing that for that leader?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And I can give just a couple specific examples. One of the early warning signs that I think stood out to me is actually people's calendars. I had a chief officer who we were like literally opposites. So my calendar was much more open and I put big things on, but I didn't put every little thing on. But what happened with that a lot of times is that allowed for people to interrupt. And then I didn't get my work done sometimes. And on the flip side, if you don't make that space and really put that time in your calendar when you need that space to think or finish your task, then it does open up because people see your calendars open and they'll book something or walk in your door. So opposite of that, one of my individuals who worked with me, she scheduled everything. And so there was no time for her to have conversations with people. So then she didn't have time for meetings and couldn't get things done. It took a little bit longer. So really watching the calendar, I think, is a big indicator, especially in the hybrid world today where you have to look at people's calendars. You can't just go down the office and knock on the door in many instances. Also, shortness and irritability. I mean, little things that you wouldn't notice about if you are really in tune with your leaders, really watching habits change. If they're short with you on something and they're typically not short, it really allows you to have a quick conversation to say, hey, how are things going? What's going on in your world right now, to kind of interrupt that a little bit and see if they're just not getting things completed or done. On the flip side, you can see that with an individual who is 100% going all the time and they used to get their work done to perfection, and now they're not hitting their deadlines. They're missing those deadlines. So really watching behavioral changes, I guess, would be what I would say with that. And kind of mismatch, those are red flags I would look for. I think the common thread through that is margin, really making sure that leaders have opportunities to build in margin into their time, their calendars, and the relational aspect of what they're doing. Because your work is your work when you show up, but you bring your home life, you bring the things that happen. And if, as CEOs, if we're not looking at what's going on with our team, we might be missing out on quality work being done for the organization or meeting mission for the organization.
Yeah, love it. Your comment about calendaring, I think, is so apropos. I've heard it said one time, and I think there's truth to it, that allows some, you use the word margin, it's a great word, allow some margin in your calendar so it's not stacked, like you said, one appointment on the next, on the next. And actually, I was listening to a podcast the other day on really high-end executives that they were saying for their organization that in an hour, they're asking their executives to take the last 10 minutes. So work for 50, but take 10 minutes and just process, think, walk, do something that just gives you a little space so you're not slammed all the time, because if you are, you're really going to wear out very quickly. I also like your
Absolutely.
comment about the chief executive officers or C-suite people. Just when you say, "How are you doing?" And if you say it in a tone of voice that really cares,
Mhm.
he or she will open the door to their inside world. Maybe not totally,
Absolutely.
but they know that you're interested in them. And yeah, like you said, there's things happening at home and personal life, whatever it may be. And yeah, that has powerful impact on a person's productivity at work. So excellent points. I really appreciate them. Okay, question number two. You navigate boards, funders, public agencies as a CEO. What's one thing more that nonprofit leaders understand about managing those relationships when the stakes are really high? So, what does that look like for you?
Love this question because with boards, with funders, with public agencies, they aren't transactions, they are relationships. And a lot of times people utilize those relationships as transactions, and that's when things can go down different paths or unmet needs for your organization can go because you haven't really treated those people like humans or built into the relationship. That's a big piece of it. Early in my CEO career, on the government side, I didn't know a lot about how to work with the government contracting, and I knew that I didn't know a lot, so I chose radical honesty. And I just
Mm.
started asking questions that said, "Hey, I'm new to government funding. I want to make sure that we're a good partner for you. What is it that we can do to better serve you?" I would ask questions, and that transparency, they would say over and over again to us to say, nobody tells us the truth always. They don't say when things are working and when they're not working. Because I would come back and say, "Hey, we said we were going to do this, but this isn't the path that we need to go down. We think we need to pivot and go down this path. And, are we meeting the guidelines? Are there any, policies that we need to check into?" And they were like, "No, this is great. We're really getting good feedback." And then that opened doors for more pilot programs, more testing, and going that route. And I went as far as, this is probably 3, 4 years into our government contracting, and we had received a few grants that year and had leftover money. And we knew by the end of the fiscal year, we were going to have some money. And so I called 3 months in advance and said, "Hey, look, we've gotten some grants this year. We're not going to be able to spend all of this money. And I felt like I needed to call you guys and let you know, but is this going to hurt us by giving you back this money? Can you use it or reallocate it?"
Yeah.
And they were like, "Yes, we can."
Mm.
Because most of the time with government contracting, the mindset is use it or lose it. But
Right.
if you have that relationship and that, open conversation with them, they loved it. And so we would talk 3 months out. "Hey, where does it look? Is there going to be any extra? If so, yeah." And then what that allowed was the next year potentially more funding because they knew that we were going to use the public money wisely. And that is such a high level of trust to have with a government contracting agency. And that is something that I see nonprofits miss all the time when it comes to that. Really, really being open and honest about that. The other point I think I wanted to make with this question, because I thought it was so good, is when you have relationships with all of these different people, sometimes you can't do it all as the CEO. And so you have to you're going to have a partner who might be needier than another partner, or just the timing is that you have to spend more with maybe the board versus this funder. So really building into your staff and developing them to build those relationships, I think was key to our success because they didn't need me as the CEO. They just needed our organization and somebody who could answer questions and make decisions.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key learning for working with boards and funders.
Yeah. So good. Well, I love the comments you made on trust and just a personal story here. We work with foundations where I'm involved, and we gave a proposal to this organization. We've been working with them for many, many years. So there was a level of trust, collaboration, working together, interacting back and forth. So our dollar amount was a set dollar amount. They came when we got the response back from them. They said, "We want to give you more because we see what you're wanting to do, but we also know who you are." And
Yeah.
that was an amazing opportunity.
Great.
Well,
Absolutely.
you talked about asking questions, and so we're gonna delve into that a little bit more in this next question. Can you share an example of a set of questions that, you asked, but then it completely shifted, the situation, how a leader saw what he or she was facing?
I would say that it's not just a specific set of questions. I think as a CEO, you tend to be tempted to solve the problems.
Oh,
And so you have leaders coming in and instead taking that time to slow down and ask the right question of a leader because they were constantly bringing you, hey, how do I solve this problem? What do I do here? And I really had to shift that mindset that they had the power to answer those questions. And so I had this leader who was exceptionally capable and deeply committed, and she did amazing work, but the volume became unsustainable.
mm.
And so deadlines started to slip. And it wasn't because she didn't lack she didn't have the ability to do the job. It's that she believed only she could do the work.
Oh, sure.
And so the question that I kind of shifted, I kept seeing this delegation was a real issue for her. And, when I'd ask why, I tried a variety of things, but finally I said, what would change for you, your team, or the organization if you didn't do this perfectly?
Oh, yeah.
Would it hurt the clients? And so that was really something that she struggled with for a while. And finally, she started to see that, hey, I can do this, but delegation takes time. So that was that juxtaposition of doing it yourself faster or building in that margin in your schedule to develop. And we then proceeded to actually get her some coaching, 6 months of coaching, and to see somebody go a full 180. I mean, just her leadership ability, when it clicked for her, she was one of the best. She grew within the organization all the way up to the C suite level. People seek her out for her development skills, for her answers, and she's become one of the best people developers in the organization. And that was just such a brilliant moment of just, she had the ability, but seeing that if you develop other people, the impact you can have multiplies and really, letting go to do that.
Yeah.
That was probably it was a fun one for me. I love seeing people develop and, I feel like I'm always learning all the time, but I love seeing people develop. And if you've never heard of the Right Question Institute, Randy, I don't know if you've heard of the Right Question Institute
Okay.
before.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
It's an awesome place to go. It's free, but they really help you develop questions. So that's a great way to
Mm.
go. It's called the Right Question Institute. Go there, and it kind of has a process that you go through on how you develop questions. The other thing that I would suggest for people to do, especially in this day and age of AI, a lot of people use AI, ask some questions, kind of just a little bit of questions with AI. What I would do is ask it to be a thought partner for you.
That's
Let it ask you questions and just play
sure.
around with that. And what I discovered when I was doing that is I was leaving out a lot of key information that it needed to help me process some information. And so that has helped me by playing around and utilizing AI, really helped me ask better questions, but give context and information up front a whole lot better than that I had before. So it's just another way to practice that if that's a skill that you want to really learn how to utilize.
Well, thank you for sharing that with me. I wrote the name down. I'll look at it afterwards, but also for our audience. And you mentioned AI. We're sort of on the verge of something really explosive within our world today, taking so much knowledge and information and giving it on our fingertips in a moment. So I utilize AI quite frequently around the idea of what am I missing? What could I ask better? What are areas that I should be looking at developing more? But I want to make a comment. Kudos to you for this idea of helping somebody who sees himself or herself as a perfectionist. I think
Mhm.
maybe not in every C-suite person, but in a number of them, the bar is so high. They're
Mm.
chargers. They're out at probably 5:30 in the morning. I don't know. They're fired up, but it's all about they have to perform also, and that it's so important for them to achieve these standards and for them to be able to, like you said, this one individual you worked with, to release it to somebody else. Yes, you should be coaching and mentoring that new person, but it really is now it's multiplication rather than addition. And I think for an individual to say, how could I impact so many more people in my nonprofit by doing what you just said? Such a great point. Well, hey, we're getting close to the end. Here's the last question on sustainable leadership. Many nonprofit leaders, I think, live in a frame of reference that I can't slow down. It's a luxury to slow down. So, how do you help people create, we'll just say, space to think clearly about themselves, about what they're facing when everything else seems so pressing, so urgent for them?
I am. Having 30 years working in nonprofits, the opportunity to learn from my mistakes over the years and grow from that have been plentiful. And this is one of them. I'm definitely a risk taker, go getter, hard charger, but leaders can't afford not to slow down. That time that you have, building that thinking time in your schedule, giving yourself, and while I appreciate the 10 minutes, I don't think that's enough. I think
Right.
you really need to, even if you have back to back meetings for maybe 3 hours, if you have to do that, but
Sure.
then you need to take the afternoon off to process
For sure.
that. And in this day and age, like we said with AI, if it's taking meeting notes for you, then you processing how can you turn that into whatever product that is you need. But building that thinking time into your schedule, stepping out of the urgency so you have time to really look at the problem from different angles, I think is huge on that ways that you can do that. One of the ways that, your typical ways, taking time off, building it into your calendar, going on retreats, those are all great things. I love learning. And so for me, that's a really good think time. So I chose going to conferences. And it was about the content versus where the conference was going to be. And when I would go to those conferences on an idea or a thought that was new or coming out, from an innovative standpoint, I would go there and just intentionally learn new things. And it allowed me to think about our organization and what we could do in such different ways and how we could apply. And it wasn't nonprofit conferences. This was like business, what was
Yeah.
happening in the industry, where the future was, and things like that. So for me, that was kind of a big deal to be able to learn how to process that. And then in the evening, I would take that to relax, enjoy, and scribble my notes. But I came back as a leader excited about the future with opportunities on where we could go with what we were doing and how we could use this to innovate in our organization. I'm sorry, my phone is off. So that's the exciting part. I think I really enjoyed that. And it also gave me clarity. And I think when you have that thinking time, you get such clarity that you can bring back to your team, as
Mhm.
well as getting rest, depending on where you go and if it's a good time. So,
Yeah.
it just depends on when you take that time to slow down, what you can do with that energy when you get back.
Yeah. Such great advice and wisdom for us as high charging leaders. That was an interesting thought. I try and listen to podcasts in different fields than the
Mhm.
fundraising world, whether it be marketing or AI or leadership. Boy, it does open up your horizon to things you didn't think.
Does.
And then you can say to yourself, well, how could I take that leadership principle, that AI technology principle into my world now? Or how could I share it with my team? So great insights. We tend to be very narrow in our expertise that we don't see
Mhm.
the breadth that is out there that is really available today so readily. So great response. Well, I've got what I call the Fast Five. I ask this to every guest on my podcast, and these don't have anything to do with what you've been working professionally on, but just more who you are as a person, get to know you a little better. So here's the first question. What's the best piece of professional advice you've ever received?
It actually came from my father. He told me that you may have the title and the education, but you don't have all the answers. So when you walk into a new organization or a new position, listen first, learn, build trust, and then make your mark. And that has really served me well. He told me many stories in the military of how he would go in and sergeants would know a lot more, but because others didn't listen, they just decided this is what they were going to do when they walked in the door with that new position. He really built trust and built some great teams by listening first and then implementing changes if they were needed.
Yeah.
So
Question number two, what's one daily habit you cannot live without?
reading my Bible for discernment, it keeps me grounded. But reading in general, I'm dyslexic and reading has been a struggle all of my life. And so now that I can't absorb it enough. So reading is a huge part of my life.
Question number three, imagine if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, what would be one piece of advice you'd give to you as a young person?
It's a great question, especially I think for women, Randy, you're enough is what I want to say. You're
Mm,
enough.
yeah.
Not what you achieve, if you have to prove it, but you're just simply enough. And as a mom, as a worker, as a wife, as a daughter, you're enough. And I think the same is true for men. A lot of times, you're enough.
Yeah. Wonderful advice. We live in a performance orientated world, and the images are constantly bombarding us. So that's such a great truth. Okay, we're going to dig a little deeper here. What is a failure from your past that actually set you up for success?
Well, like I said, I like to learn from. I think failing forward to success is a good strategy. So I had many things to choose from, but I chose two. One was a new management position, very young in my career. On paper, I was the stronger candidate, and I had better outcomes. I had better data, but I didn't get the role. And when I got the feedback was that I didn't articulate well why I wanted the position and what I would do with that position moving forward, because it was a writing assignment. And like I said, with dyslexia, that was, that
Mhm.
wasn't my strong suit. So I really took that information and learned that, leaders have to translate their thinking very clearly for others for it to be successful. And that really helped me as I was moving forward do a better job at that communication aspect of understanding what the role was, getting the clarity in advance, and then being able to articulate that. The other one was kind of midway through the career, and I was excited and I'm trusting individual, and I trusted a partner. We wrote a grant for them, and they eventually were awarded a $140,000 grant, and we didn't formalize that contract that
Uh,
we were going to be a part of that, and they never wrote us into. They decided not to utilize us after we
um,
wrote the contract. So that was something I also learned from that: is good intentions don't replace clear agreements, and integrity has to be protected with boundaries and accountability. And so for me, communicating with clarity and structuring relationships wisely were the two biggest lessons I learned from failing.
wow, that could be a TED Talk.
It could, couldn't it?
Really? Yeah, that's insightful. Such depth there. Okay, here's the last question. What's your favorite place on earth to discharge or recharge or disconnect?
I think it's in threes for me: spiritually, relationally, and physically. First, spiritually, when things are going rough, talking to people, talking to God, discerning with trusted voices around me. The second is reconnecting with my family, or my what I call my family, whether it's my actual kids, husband, parents. Those relationships really do restore your identity, and restoration and resilience come from identity for sure. And then finally, place matters. I love the beach. I love the mountains. So getting my feet in the sand, out in nature, going for a walk, all of those things really help me kind of rebuild, because leadership, especially at the top, the pressure's high and isolation is heavy, and decisions you make change people's lives. And you need that time to rebuild and restore.
Well, Tricia, what a delight it has been to pop into your world just for a few minutes, get to know you better. Been very insightful, your expertise and being able to put it in practical, tangible ways for our audience. So, well, I'd love to give you an opportunity to just share how people can connect with you. What would that look like? Just love for you to have that opportunity.
Oh, thank you so much. If you want to chat or set up a time just to talk for 15 minutes, I have a website. It's UZ and BUZ partners.com, buzzpartners.com. Would love to talk with you. Thank you so much. This was very much a delight for me.
All right. Well, thank you for taking in this podcast today. Again, my name is Dr. Randy Dirks. This is Funding Your Future Now, and we'd love to have you back on future episodes. So, bye.
Absolutely.